Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mr. Fox Terrific, and this is my second D&D Stories video. My first one, if you haven't seen it yet, please go check that out. It is called D&D Stories number 1, The Cult of the Fire Dragon. This one is hellzvog. Hellzvog is a character I created and a race I created. He was a cleric. I kind of planned him out to be the main healer for my party, but that position had been claimed by the druid, who provided food and minor healing. Well, not minor healing, but all the healing. I could do some healing, but mostly it was to myself. I kind of designed him as he was an acolyte of a war god. He had a crap load of weapons. He had a lot of strength, high wisdom, and all of his other stats were kind of, not great. And so hellzvog was a race I designed called the Urgles, similar to orcs, or ogres, kind of a cross between them, sort of. And so it was kind of almost satyr-like, but let's not get into the meat of it. So basically, we were on a campaign, and he got a reputation very quickly, and he was not especially liked. Well, no, he wasn't disliked, but he wasn't necessarily liked, because he put the party into some danger while we were exploring a haunted house campaign, sort of thing. The table, the main dining table, was enchanted to release magic flying weapons from the table to attack. Now, my character already had a history of collecting tables. Don't ask why. I just kind of, that kind of just happened, and I just flew with it and made him the table guy. Whenever he saw a table, he couldn't resist chopping it up with his giant axe and taking it with him. Well, he carried as many tables as he could, and he would actually ditch weapons rather than tables. You know, he grabbed end tables, stool kind of tables, coffee tables, whatever tables he could find. Didn't really matter what was on them or who they belonged to, just as long as they were tables. And so, when we got to that table, a couple of the other party members had already grabbed food, and the table was like about to release, but I had already grabbed my axe and was about to start attacking the table to chop off bits of it so that I could take as much of it as I could. And then once I started ripping it to shreds, taking a couple of pieces of it, forks and stuff, knives and whatever, came out of it and started attacking us. And later on, he tried to steal many tables, but then the way that he died, well, he never really died, but the way that he almost died was, and the way that he kind of left the party, was that the campaign had finished, they all went their separate ways. He found the most amazing table ever made in history. It was made by elves and dwarves and orcs. They all worked together on it, making a diplomatic table in another world, another plane of existence, long forgotten. And they had made this table for diplomatic decisions, and then he wanted it, and then he wanted that table. He went on his own personal quest, found the table, then made a table farm, where he planted tables and grew trees. He grew the trees separately, of course. The tables never sprouted anything, because his wisdom was not, and his intelligence, too, wasn't especially high. He was not the smartest person, but, you know, he decided to plant tables and trees and make more tables out of trees. And I'm also going to tell you about another character that I made called Izkyoto. He was a rat folk, and he was just... We were doing a mine kind of campaign, exploring a mine, dungeon-esque sort of area, and so they had just bypassed a chamber where they needed to sacrifice one of the party members. I sacrificed my previous character, Varys Nightbreeze, who was a bard. He was the least important member of the party. The bard is normally useful, but, you know, they decided to get rid of him instead of anyone else. Well, he decided to sacrifice himself. And then he lost his magic sword and a couple of other, that sort of thing. And then they met izkyoto behind that wall, who had been stuck behind there for quite some time, had gone completely insane, and he was just off. Like he was given a shiny rock, and he mutilated and amputated his own eye so that he could have an eye patch. For some reason, he didn't just put the eye patch over it. Well, he made an eye patch out of the shiny gold stone, and he did a lot of stuff like that. In combat, he wasn't the most effective, but he was the most effective for finishing traps because he'd kind of jump into them head first, and then no one else would have to worry about them. And he was a fighter for some reason. I don't really know why. I just had to choose a class that kind of fit, and I wanted to go try out Battle Master, and that kind of worked for izkyoto. And so his death was not a graceful one. You see, he had recently ingested some poisonous gas that had functioned as somewhat similar to LSD or a similar hallucinogenic sort of substance. And then he had also ingested quite a bit of alcohol. All that sort of stuff, normal stuff for a rat folk character. And then they came to an area where one of them had to sacrifice themselves again, but then that person got a magical item at the end of it, and so he tried to sacrifice himself, but another member of the party did instead, and they got the magical item because they had seen through it, just as I had. And then there was a dragon, and I thought izkyoto's big finish would be to kind of finish off this big green dragon that everyone was kind of scared of, but then they finished off a couple of rounds later after I had, well, let me just explain how izkyoto died. So he had a couple of explosives, and earlier in the campaign, he had used one of the explosives to blow up a boulder that was separating them from a giant golem that was trying to murder them because one of the other members tried to steal his axe, and so he kind of unleashed that golem. Then after that, they came to an area full of giant cockroaches, and then he had killed one and worn its head as a hat to try and convince the others that he was a cockroach as well, and that worked, and he just had the best luck for the entire campaign. And then at the end of a dynasty of this character, he died because he ingested one of his explosives, jumped into the dragon's mouth, and exploded, dealing a total of 10 damage. Less than a single one of his weapons attacks maximum, which was kind of sad. He exploded in the process, of course, and, I threw him into the mouth instead of just the explosive, but, I thought being more direct might have worked better. And that concludes the story of Hellzvog and izkyoto, two of my other favorite characters that I've ever played, because rather than being the most effective in gameplay, they were just the most fun. And that concludes this D&D Stories video. Please continue to watch, as I said at the beginning. The first one is also on my channel. It's about a cult of the Fire God, but then, converting religions in D&D times. It's also really good, and I plan to be continuing this series. And remember, always play more D&D when you have the chance. It's a great game, and if you don't already play it, I suggest you try and convince some of your friends or something of the sort. Play other games like it, but